Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Long. I am the president of the National Environmental Health Association. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us today and here for our webinar. I just graduated, now what? We are pleased to have you, and we hope that it'll be informative and a valuable information for you. And I'll turn this over to Tracy.
Hi, thank you, President Long, for that warm welcome. On our agenda today, we will be covering a number of important job-related topics. Our first session will be on resume and cover letter development. Then we will move into interviewing best practices and then wrap up with how to continue your education and training throughout your career life cycle. Our prestigious webinar panel is made up of NEHA officers, board members, and NEHA staff. We will allow them to all present their information before we move into a 30-minute Q&A session. Please feel free to enter any questions or comments in the chat box so we can cover anything you are interested in learning more about. Please make sure you stick around after the presentation for that as well. We will be launching a few polls throughout the webinar. Please make sure you have the poll box open and participate as they pop up. Also, please keep an eye on the presenters' job titles as they pop up in case you would like to ask them any specific questions about their experiences during the Q&A. So without further ado, let's jump into our first topic set, which is resumes and cover letters. Rochelle and Steve, please take it away.
Yes, my name is Rochelle Blackham. I'm currently the Environmental Health Director for one of the most populated counties in Utah. As mentioned by Tracy, I am one of the NEHA Regional Vice Presidents representing Region 3, so that does include Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and areas outside of the United States. I have been in the field of environmental health for about 15 years, super passionate about the topics that we plan to present today. Started as an intern and now I'm at the top. So obviously some of these skill sets I feel like I can share, and hopefully you can learn from this presentation. I'm going to allow Stephen and James to introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Rochelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Dortis. I am the Human Resources Business Partner at the National Environmental Health Association. I received my master's training in industrial and organizational psychology. So when it comes to all things assessment and selection when going into that job interview and things alike, that is where I received my training and specialization. So I am fairly new to NEHA, but as I get started, it's going to be a joy to connect with many of you as you get started on your career journey. So having said that, if James is on, I will turn it to him for his introduction.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is James Speckart, and for those who are watching this video, you may be noticing that I'm actually wearing a uniform. Well, I'm actually a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Public Health Service, which is the commissioned officer corps of the Surgeon General. I'm an environmental health officer. I have my qualifying environmental health master's degree from Old Dominion University, and I've been in the commission corps since 2008, currently at the FDA Research Campus in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I conduct environmental health related duties for the various buildings for our center, as well as for the biosafety labs, level 2, where I provide environmental health, industrial hygiene, and occupational safety duties. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. We will go ahead and get started. Says I have control. Michael, it is not moving. Michael, can you advance my slide for me? Okay. This lists out our names again of those of us who are speaking. Can you advance the slide again? Perfect. So we will start with cover letters. I definitely think writing a cover letter is starting off on the right foot. Michael, will you move my slides again? Perfect. Thank you. So I believe that a cover letter can definitely enhance your application packet, and it can help you stand out throughout the process. So according to Forbes, 53% of employers prefer candidates to submit a cover letter. Just trying to talk from more of a personal experience, I do prefer a cover letter. Here in Utah, for the health jurisdiction that I represent, most of our jobs are promoted on Indeed Jobs. We have about 50 to 60 applicants who apply for an environmental health scientist position usually. And we believe probably about 20–25% of those individuals do submit a cover letter. And from my experience, I do believe it sets them apart. Michael? Thank you. So first off, wanting to talk about cover letter dues. What should we be doing? I think a cover letter is an opportunity for you to get attention. It's your chance to impress, set yourself apart. There are a lot of aids and templates available for you to use, so you definitely should. If ones are out there and look nice, that's the way to start. Always staying positive is definitely the key. Don't bring up negative items, and I can go over the don'ts on the other slide, but be yourself, share your personality. It is a chance for you to be a voice. So if you think about it, you're filling out just generic information about yourself in the application. You're highlighting things very briefly in your resume, but in a cover letter, it's the chance to write paragraphs, tell them who you are. I definitely think you should express enthusiasm about the position. Why do you want to work for them? Why do you want to work for that company? Why should they pick you? Those kind of things you can kind of set yourself apart in a cover letter. Highlight your contributions or your interests. This is an opportunity, again, to sell yourself. And of course, it's really, really important that you proofread your cover letter, because even though I said it can enhance your application packet, it can hurt you, which gets me into the cover letter don'ts. So don't highlight unrelated skills or experience. Stay very focused on what the job you're applying for is. Again, poorly crafted or unrelated templates. If you pull something off of the internet and it says, you know, I am very interested in your sales marketing position, yet you're applying for an environmental health scientist position, that would be poorly crafted, unrelated. Trying to be too personal, or if you're trying to be funny, it is important to be genuine, as well as not too generic, like saying I'm a people person. This is an opportunity for you to express your personality, but be careful with that, is what I'm going to say. Don't request specific pay in a cover letter. And again, I mentioned this in the previous slide, but do not include negative information or express that you are a disgruntled employee from a previous employer. Don't make it too long, not more than 1 page. So a cover letter should stick to 1 page. Again, talking about proofreading and how a cover letter could hurt you. Make sure it doesn't have errors. Moving on to a really good example here that I had someone submit to me recently this year. It is a cover letter. Kind of wanted to highlight a couple things on this good example. So right here, expresses enthusiasm. The individual writes, I jumped at the opportunity to apply ever since I decided on being a major, or decided on my major at the Brigham Young University. I have dreamed of becoming a community health educator and share my passion for disease and injury prevention. Here in my division, we hire community health educators to help us do outreach for environmental health as well. Again, wanting to highlight skills and how these skills apply to the job opportunity. In the second paragraph, it specifically says, I know that I can take these skills that she just mentioned above and apply them to my interactions with community partners for the vehicle repair and replacement assistant program, which was for that specific job. And then just highlighting throughout this entire thing how positive and the personality that gives off. It very much sets her apart. And this individual did receive employment based off of her interviews and everything else. At this time, I'm going to turn the time over to Stephen.
Thank you, Rochelle. So we will be covering resumes, and we will do a little section on networking as well. But we'll start with resumes. And as you see, don't be afraid to brag. And what I mean by that is this is your chance to really show what you've done and why you're going to be good on the job, why you're going to be a successful candidate on the job should they select you. All right, so and this slide we have an example of a very strong resume, and it takes you through the essential elements that you really want to include on your resume. But the one thing that I really want to drive home is that this is more about aesthetic readability. You want to make sure that you can convey your information. There we are. Convey your information concisely and as it relates to the job. So you heard Rochelle discuss how the cover letter can also be a time to address alignment. That's exactly what you want to do here as well. You want to make sure that you're able to express and communicate why you're going to be a successful candidate on the job. So one thing that I do want to mention as well is that typically once you get going in your career, your experience section will grow, and it typically takes over the prominent section of your resume. Some people include their education on the top as they start applying for positions. Really, the important thing I want to drive home is the aesthetic readability of it. So you don't want to take away from your qualifications, from what you've done, and from your experiences with a sloppy resume. And this also goes back to that proofread as well. So I'll mention that a few times throughout this this presentation. All right, so the resume do's. Do not be afraid to use numbers and statistics and figures to express your achievements. You know, if you've increased productivity here, show how much you've increased productivity. Definitely keep your format simple. If you do not want to overwhelm anyone with a very crazy format, use a template similar to the cover letters. There's a variety of templates that are very acceptable. And again, you're going for readability, you're going for concise job-related information. You do want to tailor your resume to the job for which you're applying. And whether that's intern experiences, volunteer, extracurricular, whatever that is, you really want to try and tailor those experiences to the job language itself as well. So again, what we're trying to do here is predict how you're going to be on the job. So if you have some experiences that you're able to tie to this job for which you're applying, that gives us more confidence that you're the right fit and that you're going to be successful. And again, proofread. We receive hundreds of resumes. When we see mistakes, when we see sloppiness, that's what detracts from your credentials and qualifications. The resume don'ts. Again, you know, the first thing, mistakes, typos, errors, this is how you detract from what you've been able to do. So it's might be a little unfair at times, but you really don't want to take away from all that you've done. And as you graduate, you want to be able to highlight that with any of those detractors. So again, using fonts that don't impact readability. You don't want to get in the way of the recruiter's job of trying to identify how you're going to be on the job. Do not embellish or lie. I know that sounds self-explanatory, but you want to speak to what you've done and what you can do. You don't want to oversell and underdeliver, because that's also how you start to burn a network that you're going to start creating as you get into your career, okay? And you also want to avoid the personal pronouns. And that's just one of those things that won't disqualify you, but it's also just a sign of a professional resume. All right, networking. So very briefly, yes, you have to, okay? And it's one of those things that it can scare people, but it shouldn't. And networking is about the trading of the information, developing long-term authentic relationships. It's not just about going up and asking people for a job, right? So if you see these two statistics, 85% of positions are filled through networking, 70% of people found a job through connections, and then 1 in 6 candidates who apply for a job are actually asked to interview. So you can see how networking is going to increase your chances of being that 1 in 6 candidate to actually be asked for an interview. All right, so the importance of networking. I'm not going to go through these, one by one, but the important thing is it's multidimensional. It's not just about meeting someone to get something. One, you're building your own network to build your own knowledge and to contribute to the field. You also want to keep your hand on the pulse, and this can be done by interacting with people in your field who might have been in the field for 30 years and have ideas and research and innovations and things to share. And once you start sharing, and once you find a way to actually help others and develop relationships by contributing to their situation, what you're doing at that point is you're developing your own career skills and knowledge base. So the importance of networking is just multidimensional, professional and personal growth. I myself am an introvert, so it can be daunting, but you want to go with your passion, you want to go with your interests, you want to make sure that you're sticking to authentic passion and interest when you're doing this networking. So again, networking is a reciprocal mutual relationship. You are trying to help them just as much as you want their help. Okay, so look to ways to add to their situation. Understand and research who you're going to be meeting with. There's different types of opportunities out there. So if you're going to a conference, do some research on who might be there. What are they doing? What's their research look like? What are their interests in the field look like? Because then that gives you an opportunity to genuinely discuss that. And that's what you're looking for, that relationship, that reciprocity. So the other thing I'll mention is you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to just go up to one and say, "Hi, my name's Steve. Can I please have a job?" That's not what you want to do. So you want to, it's patience, it's a long haul. You're going to be more fruitful in the end by being authentic, by being patient, and by understanding that it's really a development of relationships. Okay, and again, not going to go through these lists, but if networking scares you a little bit, there are many different ways to do it. There's social media, all the way to formalized opportunities like conferences and various events. So really, if you dumb it down, networking is about making those relationships. You can do that anywhere. You really can. It's about authenticity, it's about interest, and it's about reciprocity. So there's various opportunities for those of us who are not keen on the networking opportunities. There's a variety of different ways to get involved. So I don't want you to be scared and I don't want you to shy away from it, because there's a variety of different ways to build relationships with people. And again, things to avoid. Don't be too forward. Don't go for that kill right away. It's about patience. It's about the long haul. And when you offer to help someone, don't fail to deliver. That's how you can really start to burn those connections that you've been building. And as you deliver, you really are then substantiating your relationships. You're making them much more reciprocal and mutual and long lasting. Then other people are willing to help you out as well. Hey, did you hear what Steve did for me? You know, give him a hand. It's things like that. So also similar to your resume, don't oversell. What you can do, bring to the table. And I will turn the next slide over to James.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. What's been presented by Steve and Rochelle has been actually very helpful, and I hope you do find benefit to it. I have a few moments to talk about the resources that would help you to better communicate in writing on your resume, on your cover letter, what you're trying to promote about yourself in terms of the position you're going for. These are some select publications, the first two of which actually I became aware of through my officer basic training. As you know, I mentioned being in the U.S. Public Health Service, which is the Surgeon General's Officer Corps. And just like any other uniform service, we have training we go through. And as part of the training, we learn about resources. And these are two publications in particular. The first two listed were presented to all the officers who go through the officer basic training. In addition, the What Color Is Your Parachute? I've known about that for many years when I was in school for my previous degrees. So all of them you should become familiar with them. In addition to those actual print publications, you can also probably look up the authors on YouTube and get some video instruction perhaps. And most recently came across this national news radio story from NPR. I thought it was very timely. I am usually listening or review what's on those particular broadcasts each day and figure out what's most helpful to me. This was a particular item of interest. I did want to point out that, as it's been mentioned, that any one of the presenters on this webinar is available or should be making themselves available as much as they can to you. You have to reach out to them. We are available through the NEHA website, whether it's the RVP website or the NEHA staff. Just look us up and we're more than happy to help you out. I have a LinkedIn account, but if you reach out to me through LinkedIn or the NEHA email, I'll be more than happy to reach back to you and actually have a phone call and mentor you in whatever way would be helpful. And I also would like to mention that in addition to the Public Health Service is hiring and always looking for environmental health category officers. There's 340 of us in the public health service. We've been a category for about 50 years, but also where I work at, FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Encourage you to look on USA Jobs for qualifying environmental health or other skill-related positions that might be of interest to you at the FDA. So those are just some of the highlights to be available and to help you out in your career development. We're all here to mentor, each one teach one, and anyone on this webinar, as I said, is available to help you out. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I do look forward to hearing from you when you're ready to follow up with any one of us. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Rochelle, James, and Steve for all that excellent information about how to write an effective and engaging resumes and cover letters. I particularly did like that section on networking. I would have to say, if there's one piece of advice I'd give to young professionals, it's join and engage, participate. You'll be amazed at how much you gain by just being out there, participating and networking with people. So don't forget, if you have any questions or comments, you can enter those into the chat and we'll cover them when we get to the end of the webinar. So next up is Sandra and Larry with information and advice on how to conduct an effective job search and knock it out of the park on any job interviews you may do, whether in person or virtual. So without any further ado, again, it's all yours, Sandra and Larry.
Okay. I'll let you know, my name is Sandra Long. I am the Environmental Health Manager for the town of Addison in Texas. I'm also the NEHA president. I've got over 30 years experience in environmental health and a lot of experience in interviewing people for positions. I'm going to let Larry introduce himself, and then I will come back and we'll talk about general pointers. Larry?
Sure. My name is Larry Ramden. I am the Director of Public Health in the town of Watertown, Massachusetts. I'm also the Region 9 Vice President, and I've been practicing in environmental health for over 40 years, and I hope one day to get good at it.
Very nice. So I'm going to talk to you about general pointers and preparation tips. And Larry is going to talk to you about your in-person interview, your virtual interviews, and your second interviews. So general pointers and preparation tips. An interview is a sales pitch. You're selling yourself and your suitability for that position that you're applying for. So you need to be able to explain to them why you are the best candidate for that job. So always keep that in mind while you're speaking during an interview. Make sure that you arrive at least 5 minutes before the scheduled interview at the very minimum. Again, we've always said, if you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. So with that, always make sure that you do show up ahead of time. Appearance. Appearance is very important. Make sure that you dress accordingly for the job that you are being interviewed for. If it does usually help to, look around, see who they've hired, see how they dress for the job, and go appropriately dressed for that interview. Know what you're applying for. Again, when you apply for the job, make sure that you do understand what that position is. You've read the job description. You kind of have it under your belt as to, yes, this is what I'm applying for, and I have an idea of why I want this job. Know a bit about the company, the organization, the community. That's always very helpful, so that you've done some research into that and you know who you're applying to, why you're applying to them, and what their philosophies and everything are within that company. Questions. Answer the questions directly and in complete sentences. Are you familiar with risk assessment? Yes. No. Are you familiar with risk assessment? Yes, I am. I've had several opportunities to do risk studies in the following. Again, give examples, give complete sentences, and answer the questions directly. Do not name drop. Please, that it doesn't really help you sometimes when you do the name drop. I was in an interview where the candidate decided to drop my name. I had never met the candidate before that moment, which is awkward when you name drop like that. So please do not name drop. Provide answers to gaps in your resume. If you had a year on your resume that there's not accounted for, make sure to say, well, I was doing an internship, or make sure they understand why there are gaps in the resume. There's nothing wrong with a gap in the resume. Just make sure that your potential employer understands what it is you've got. Do not apply for the position unless you really want it and you want to be hired for it. Because you're in there, you're applying for a job, and when you're in there doing that interview, that person interviewing you is making that assumption that yes, you really do want this job. You're not just interviewing for the fun of it. You are truly interested and you are a potential hire. So make sure that you do know the job and are truly interested in it. Highlight your skills that make you marketable. For example, if you speak a variety of languages, make sure that that is in your resume and that you do bring it up. That's always very highly marketable. Or other skills that you might have that will kind of potentially put you ahead of the rest. Be ready for personality questions and understand them. I always like to ask questions like, so what's your favorite movie and why? Again, because you can learn a lot about people with that sort of question. It's okay to take your time about answering a question or ask, hey, can I come back to that question? Because I'd really like to think about it. There is nothing wrong with that. It shows that you are putting some thought into it and that you do want to make a response that you have given careful thought to. Know your passion and explain how it relates to the job you're seeking. Okay. Again, very key. Make sure that you are applying yourself. If you're applying for a stormwater position, don't just say, I love, love, love geography. Explain why you love this and why it's your passion, and know something about it. Pay attention to fidgeting and movement in the interview. Stay calm. Fidgeters, movers and stuff during an interview, swinging in a chair. I understand people are nervous, but try to stay focused. Try to present yourself in the best light possible. Interviews are nerve-wracking. Group interviews, team interviews with multiple people are unnerving. So please, again, try not to fidget and put your best foot forward during that interview. Larry?
Thank you, Sandra. I wonder what else I have to say, seeing that you've covered a lot of it there. One thing I really want to highlight too is thanks to Rochelle, Stephen, James, because remember at this interview, as Sandra said, we've already found that you've met the minimum qualifications for the position and we want to find out about you. Before you go in, have some questions that you think that you may be asked, take up your phone, do a mock interview with yourself, have someone interview and record yourself. There's some mannerisms that you want to pay attention to. Remember, in some cultures, it is not appropriate to look people directly in the eyes. In the United States of America, it is required. Because if you don't look the questioner directly in the eyes, it is believed that you're being evasive in your responses. So pay attention to that. There's very significant cultural mores that you really want to pay attention to. Also pay attention to things like the arms, the butts. If you stop touching your face, you may have nervous twitches that you really need to pay attention to. And remember, they're here to find out if you're here for a fit. They're not making a decision on whether or not to send you to the electric chair or not. So it's relax. A good interviewer would relax you at the interview. Know the environment that you're coming into and know where people are around the table. When people introduce themselves, if you're like me who don't remember people's names, write it down on a pad. While we are a very informal society, during the interview process, you want to address everyone as Mr. or Ms. You have not reached that level of familiarity with them. If they say, call me Bob or call me Jane during the interview, then do that, but maintain that formality during the interview. And again, take your time and respond. What you really don't want to do is use a lot of slangs or colloquials in your responses. Me, I was not born in the United States, and I have a ton of colloquials, and I have to always remember that no one I'm speaking to understands my colloquials. So I really have to explain it and speak slowly. Virtual interviews is the norm right now because of COVID. And prior to this, we did have phone interviews, but with virtual interviews, remember, you're attending an interview all the same. Dress and turn up as if you were interviewing in person. Be aware of your surroundings wherever you're choosing to do the interview from. Make sure that there are no distractions around you. You want the interviewer paying attention to you, not wondering, wow, that is a really great painting in the background. I wonder who's it by? Or how did this person get Monet in their house? And it goes there. So also, do you have pets? Are they going to be coming to the interview with you? I don't know if the interviewer interviewing your pets for a job or not, so please exclude them. Make sure your online presence, your camera, your phone, whatever you're using to attend the interview is working. Try it out before. You don't want to run into problems during an interview. One of the worst things you can have happen is lose your internet connection. If you try it out and wherever you're interviewing from, it's not great, find a location where you would have really good signals so your streaming presence for that interview will be good. Additionally, for your second interviews, on your first interviews, never ask questions about salaries. That is a big no-no. Salaries and benefits, don't ask about it at your first interview. They may touch on it and say, this is what happens. Take a note of it. Thank you very much. Ask some questions about the position. Ask some questions about the department. You can ask a question about the leadership style or the hierarchy in the department. How is the department organized? Whom will I be reporting to? Those are great first interview questions. The second interviews, remember, it's going to be more in depth and they're going to be really digging into it. There are a lot of things that you put into your resume that made you be selected for an interview that you're going to have to be able to talk about in greater detail. You also need to be able, this is your opportunity. You're the rock star here. I'm selling myself. I want someone to pay $1 million for a car that is worth $5. This is your opportunity to sell yourself. At second interviews, you may be asked questions about salary, or you may want to ask questions about salary. Never ask the direct cost. Ask them, what is the salary range? One question that I always recommend to people is, what are the main priorities for the candidate that you hire. You can ask them about what type of qualifications, and if they ask you, you be prepared to answer that. And if you don't have a credential, that you are qualified for the credential and you're set up to take the exam in X time. Give them some timeline on acquiring the credentials that they do require for the position. The other thing that you want to make sure you look at is, why should I hire you? That is the biggest question, and you're always going to be asked this question in some shape, form, or fashion. If you can't tell me why I should hire you or why you're the best candidate for this position, I'm on to the next candidate. Make sure you have your list of references available. But more so, make sure you speak to the people whom you have listed as your references and you've advised them that I am applying for position X, you may be contacted. One of the most embarrassing things you can have happen is listing someone as an interview, as a reference, and having them being called. And when they answer, oh, I'm calling here to check on a reference, you were listed for person X, and say, oh, I didn't know they were interviewing for this position. Or I haven't seen them in years. You know, I can't account for their skill sets. That is a sure way of sinking your application and your candidacy for the position. So just to recap, I want to talk about looking at the camera. Pay attention to the camera. Pay attention to your personal grooming. Pay attention to your dress. Pay attention to your background, and be prepared to answer questions that you've put on your resume in great detail, because it is a sales pitch that you're coming here to do. And if you cannot answer those questions, you will sink your own candidacy. Thank you. Sandra?
Thank you very much. And we will be continuing on. And thank you. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer them for you or give you any additional pointers you may like to have. Tracy?
Okay. Just before we go on to the next one, I do have a list of questions that I use, and I will share it with Jonna so she can share it out with the attendees, so they can have a basic look at what they can use. They can use it to prepare themselves for an interview.
Great. Thanks for all that fantastic advice on interviewing, Sandra and Larry. I love the idea about doing the practice interviews, particularly the virtual ones, so you can really understand what that person on the other camera is seeing, whether that's your clothing background, whatever it might be. So, and sorry about the fidgeting on camera. I know you mentioned that. I tend to fidget a little bit, but anyways, okay, we're going to move on. Our last set of presenters is Tom and Gary, and they'll be taking us home with how you can continue to build your experience, knowledge, and presence in the environmental health world. You're up, guys.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Brown, and I'm a professor at Eastern Kentucky University. And I will let Tom introduce himself. I'm also NEHA's first vice president.
Thank you, Gary. Tom Butts. I'm messing with my slides here, obviously, so I apologize for that. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm currently an environmental health consultant after working 32 years for the largest local public health agency in Colorado. I've also, since that time, worked for 3 different other local environmental health agencies in Colorado, and I currently serve on the State Board of Health, representing the environmental health practice piece of that. Today, we're excited to talk to you about what you do really while you're in school in terms of connecting with associations and beyond, looking at opportunities to continue your development professionally, and as Stephen mentioned, build that network that's going to be so important to you.
So I'm going to talk about some professional organizations. Obviously, this is the National Environmental Health Association. And there's a lot of other associations if you have specific interests, like the Air and Waste Management Association, American Association of Sanitarians, which I belong to, American Industrial Hygiene Association, which I belong to, American Society of Safety Professionals. I also belong to that. And there's also the Hazardous Materials Society and Health Physics Society. So you can belong to more than one professional organization, and everybody's talking about it gives you more opportunities to network, but other opportunities to learn. That's the one nice thing about this field is you have so many different avenues you can take. And I normally do not wear a tie or a coat, but you want to dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And another thing I want to talk about real quick is a lot of you who are at schools right now, your school will offer free mock interviews. They'll actually videotape you and then they'll go over with you. Next slide, Tom, please. So why belong to the associations? There's a lot of reasons. First and foremost, a lot of health departments are going to want you to become a registered sanitarian. In a lot of states, that's required for the job, or a registered environmental health specialist. So belonging to the association, going to the National Environmental Health Association annual conference gives you continuing education CEUs. And then mentoring, everybody, all of us have had mentors. And what the nice thing about this field is we're not trying to invent something. We're not inventing a specific product or part. Environmental health is an environmental health. So if I help Tom out, it's not affecting my business or that. We're just sharing ideas and coming up with solutions. Networking, everybody's talked about the key for that. Access to resources. I'm also a member of what's called the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. And one of the reasons I'm with that organization is they have something called threshold limit values that's used in industrial hygiene. Well, being a member, I get access to those for free. Otherwise, I'd have to pay. You get new perspectives and global perspectives. The view behind me is Tobago from Larry's home country. And I've done work in Jamaica, and having that international perspective gives you a different view of things, but also talking to people. Maybe you're from a rural health department and folks in another rural health department are having a similar issue. Or maybe somebody is having a vector control problem and they've come up with an idea. And then professional development. You always, in this field, are always going to be learning. And that's one of the great things about this field.
I think.
And another thing is.
Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
No.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
As Gary has indicated, the connecting with your peers or your future peers through associations, through ongoing education opportunities, and through even through student associations. Many of, at least in Colorado, there is a student environmental health association that works closely with our state affiliate association on a number of things, and so you get to know not only the people in the business, but the organizations in the business. And that Colorado Environmental Health Association offers the study guide for the REHS exam, for example, as a good way of helping promote competencies in the career. I think that those learning experiences, those conferences, are really that fantastic opportunity to not only take your knowledge you got coming out of school, but listen to how it's applied in the real world. Listen to your peers about, that great water quality issue that you had 2 classes on when you were getting your degree. Well, how does that really work in a restaurant environment or a swimming pool environment or a water treatment environment to prevent Legionella. So really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the practice per se.
One of the things too is everybody's talked about networking, getting your name out there. If you do a presentation or several presentations, that looks great on a resume, especially as you're initially starting out in your career. And then folks will say to you, oh, I saw that talk, or I heard that talk from you. Those are the type of things that help you further your career, give you leadership abilities, give you, opportunities also. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tom now.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, these state and local affiliates, I mean, NEHA as a national organization is really embodies, members from all across the country. And our state affiliates or regional affiliates really are the folks that do a lot of the day-to-day work in the practice, whether they be folks that work in local government or academia or industry. And all three of those sectors come together in NEHA and in the state affiliates. And those conferences that the state affiliates run, those training that the state affiliates run, really are a tremendous place as a student or as an emerging professional, again, to just get to know the lay of the land, how things are really interpreted, the practice as it's evolving, and the key issues of the day, whether they be water quality related issues or lead pipe issues or PFAS and emerging contaminants, those kind of things. And then NEHA affiliates also work closely with NEHA and NEHA's job page and things like that. So there's great access to potential employment opportunities there as well. And at those conferences, I guess, again, take the opportunity and whether they're virtual or in person, to do that Q&A with speakers, to engage with other peers in the sessions you're involved in, to follow up with them as your interests drive you, to engage with exhibitors. I mean, the exhibitors and industries that we work with are tremendously valuable in us doing our jobs on a day-to-day basis. We could not do it without industry partners or industry representatives that help us understand the other side of that compliance coin, what it takes to do food safety in the certain settings and things like that. So dig deep, ask questions, engage, continue to learn. You're muted, Gary.
Sorry. I am going to talk briefly about the Uncover Environmental Health article. And one of the great things for you younger folks is on this call, over 50% of us are 50 or older in this field that are working in environmental health. So they call it the silver tsunami. A lot of us are going to be retiring, and there'll be a lot of opportunities for your generation. In the past year, NEHA's really looked and tried to assist professionals with their continuing education. So over 1,500 professionals completed educational sessions, training, webinars, and virtual conferences. Another thing that professional organizations like NEHA does is they have an interactive food safety instructor directory. So maybe you've just moved to an area and you need somebody to provide training. Well, this will give you an opportunity. Maybe you've got a specific issue. Maybe you're originally from Kentucky and now you move to California and it's dealing with seafood. So the seafood folks, the food safety instructor dealing with seafood. And then one of the things about professional organizations is they also advocate for your profession, and you want to be part of that. we want to be at the forefront. And that's one of the things that COVID has actually helped environmental health, is people started really realizing the value of public health. And we are the core of public health. We make sure you have clean food, water, air, and a safe and healthy place to live, work, and play. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, Gary, as you mentioned, advocacy is something that NEHA does. Many of us on this call today spent part of a day talking with our elected officials at the federal level around the importance of funding for environmental health programs, for our federal CDC and National Center for Environmental Health, for the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, because those super important federal resources, and the FDA, of course, those very important federal resources are absolutely essential to getting the job done at the state and local levels, and providing solid science-based practices for our profession. As indicated, the pandemic and all hazards preparedness funding, I worked for 6 years doing emergency preparedness, and including during H1N1, and that funding and that scope of work was absolutely imperative to preparing many local health agencies across the state for what they've encountered with coronavirus. I think the other thing, the Environmental Health Workforce Act that was just introduced, is intended to help look at the credentialing and the value of credentialing for environmental health professionals, again, across the country. So that we can all have sort of a clear understanding of the scope of work and knowledge and expectations around the environmental health practice. And these things help build awareness about environmental health. Many of us didn't start out in environmental health, but ended up in environmental health. And I think we continue to want to develop more knowledge, more understanding of what environmental health practitioners do and their key value in our communities. Another way that once you're out of school, or even potentially sometimes in school, is you can look at adding credentials and certifications to your resume and to your knowledge base. These credentials sometimes have education requirements, sometimes they have experience requirements, sometimes both, or publication requirements or things like that. Sometimes there's a in training status and sometimes there's not, but credentials are valued, and you may become more valuable as a potential employee if you come with a couple of credentials or a couple of certifications before you get hired. So again, being familiar with what sort of credentials people in the profession you're trying to enter or work in often have, understanding what those credentials can add in terms of not only the item on the resume, but the knowledge in your head and the ability to practice with that knowledge is super important. The certifications are a little different than credentials. Credentials usually require some sort of continuing education, an exam you have to sit for and prove your competencies and knowledge. Many certifications and certificates do require similar knowledge and maybe a exam as well. They're slightly different than credentials that are viewed or even required in some states like California. But again, these can be practice-based. The certified pool operator, the on-site wastewater kind of credentials, the HACCP around food safety credentials or certifications or certificates. All those things can give you a foot up on somebody else applying for that job that you really want. And again, NEHA sponsors many of these, and some of our peer organizations, as indicated on this slide, sponsor many others of those. So I think, Gary, is there anything else we want to mention in terms of that continuing to grow after you graduate approach to environmental health learning and practice?
I always talk to my students, the more certifications or the more continuing education you have, the more valuable you become to an employer. It's putting another feather in your cap, if you want to call it that way. So I highly encourage this is a dynamic field that's always changing, so you've always got to stay on top of it.
Tracy?
All right, awesome job, Tom and Gary. I think that's funny that you wrapped up with the credentials. Sandra and I were just talking about maintaining our REHS the other day. Good motivator for getting continuing education done, because you don't want to ever have to take that test again. All right, so now we're going to, well, first of all, does any of the presenters have anything else that they'd want to talk about right now before we move into the Q&A? Anything that from the last few topics or previous topics? Okay, all right, so we only had a few questions, so I think Jana is going to go through the polling results, and then she'll let us know what questions have come through that we can answer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jana Ashley. I'm NEHA's membership manager. Before I go into the polling results, I just wanted to call attention that my email is up there. If you are interested in connecting with any of our presenters today, as they all said they'd be happy to speak with you, you can simply send me an email and I will connect you with them. I am also happy to connect you with any of the affiliates that we spoke about. I know that they would also be happy to talk to you. We are also recording this video today, and it will be posted on the student section of NEHA's website, which as soon as I'm done reading the poll results, I'll just go ahead and pop into the chat so that you all have it there. So we asked you 3 questions during our webinar today. The first is what career stage you're in. 42% of you are still in school. 17% of you are getting ready to graduate next month. Congratulations. 17% of you are early career professionals. 8% of you are mid-career professionals. Nobody indicated that they were someone who was getting back to work after taking a little lapse in their career. And 17% of you are other. So I guess farther along in your career. The second question was, what sector are you hoping to start working in when you get your first job in EH or your second job? And so 27% of you said that state or local health department. Nobody said that they wanted to work for a branch of the federal government like the CDC, EPA, FDA, et cetera. Those are good places to work. 9% said a branch of the federal government like the military or the US Public Health Service like James works in. 9% said private sector industry. 9% said academia, and then 45% said any of these, just please give me a job. And then lastly, we asked, have you been on a professional interview yet? All of you have. 55% have been on a few, 27% have been on many, and 18% have been on some, but it's been a while. So it was good to have the refresh. All right, so we didn't get many questions in the chat box. We have a pretty small group, so if you're comfortable, feel free to come off mute if you choose and ask a question to the group. If not, you can still pop it in the box. We have one here that says, I'm an REHS RS, working mostly in food and body art, but I'm interested in water and air quality. Would you recommend any CEs or certifications to head my career in that direction? It's a good question. I'll pass that over to you, Tracy, if you have an idea of someone on our panel who might be good to answer.
Good question. I'm not sure, but Gary seemed like he was nodding, so maybe Gary wants to take a crack at that.
Myself and Tom talked a little bit about the certified food protection specialist that NEHA offers is a great one. If you're really interested in air quality, if you're interested more in occupational, the certified industrial hygiene exam would be a great one. The Air and Waste Association may have a certification. I'm not aware of what they may have. And you may look on the body art website, and I know NEHA has had some position papers on it, but that's something that's really been evolving in this field. I don't know if anybody else has any other suggestions.
Sure, this is Tom. I guess what part of water quality you're interested in. If it's on-site wastewater treatment, then certainly NAURA and NOT, the two sort of on-site wastewater treatment organizations, have some certifications and some training courses that would be applicable. And that's sort of I'll call it on the micro level, on-site for homes and businesses that are not served by public wastewater. In terms of air quality in Colorado, for example, if you're working in air quality as an inspector, for example, you might need to know to pass smoke school and odor school, but those aren't things that are normally accessible until you get into the career pathway. But I would look again at your state or the National Air and Waste Management Group or water quality groups, and I'll open that up to others beyond me as well. I do see a comment from Rochelle that EPA has good surface water and groundwater sampling courses, and I would agree with that. I suspect they have air quality sampling and air quality monitoring courses as well, that I recall back in the day when I worked in that part of the practice, that they were a good source for those sort of activities.
And for odor complaints, the company Nasal Ranger, I think you can take that certification. I've actually got to go out next week to do an odor complaint, but it's like $300 for this school. And like Tom said, a lot of times the employer will pay for it. So, but that's another one I just remembered.
Yep.
What was that school called again?
Nasal Ranger, and you've got to buy the specific instrument, and you've got to use these markers to calibrate your nose and all kinds of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have another question in the chat box, and it is, what would you recommend for people seeking to re-enter the field after a period of absence, such as caretaking? I love this question because I actually did that. So I'm not a environmental health professional, so I'll throw it out to the board, but I will say my advice as a lived person in that experience is to just go in with confidence. You have so much to add still to the field. You've gained experience living your life, taking care of, a child or a parent. And you'll be able to come back in and then just address that gap in your resume right up front when you're in that interview about what you were doing in that time. But is there anyone else on the panel who wants to address? Rochelle?
I think now is a great time to jump back into the field. Specifically, just speaking here for my county, I have about 230 federally funded CARES employees that are helping us with the COVID mass vaccination, disease investigations. Probably have about 50 temporary environmental health scientists. So if you're looking to get back in the field, I think now is a great time because there's a lot of opportunities. So I would just reach out to local health department or wherever you might be interested and see what opportunities are available during this time. Get your foot in the door.
James.
For sure.
If I may chime in on this the time that we're in regarding COVID and the acute awareness of public health and its importance, I can tell you from just brief experience that I've been in, but also I had an opportunity to work the FDA's COVID response call center for 4 months, where I took 1,000 calls. I literally have 3 binders of information on people that called. And what it made me very aware of, which is amplified by this webinar we're hosting, is the importance of health science literacy and how to act on that information. And I would encourage the students to look at the resources we provided, but also the CDC as a health education agency has a lot of good information about health literacy and health communications. And I would encourage you to look at that. You can also reach out to Jonna to find my information as well, but you can just do an internet search on cdc.gov for those topics And that would definitely give you a running start on this whole issue, because our country and our global partners, could use this information. So you're at a prime time to be a public health diplomat.
If I may, I think if you're looking to try and get back into the field after a gap, of course, identifying why you were out is a must, but really reaching out to one of your local agencies, find out what has changed in the profession between the time you left and what is happening now, because sometimes the focus may change, and see how we're doing things differently. Attend a seminar, attend some trainings on environmental health. Maybe you're here at the NEHA AEC, and this is a great place to be, to update yourself on current trends. And that is one of the most important things for you, understanding what the current trends are and what has happened between the time you left and now.
Yeah, I will fully second what Larry said. I mean, there's a tremendous number of online resources right now about the practice, whether they're live or recorded. And that really helps you sort of understand where the practice is at, and you can then speak the current language as you try and re-enter the group. And I've personally hired folks coming out of the situation you're describing, and that historic experience has also been greatly valued in terms of ability to hit the ground running and understand what the practice is all about. So emphasize that experiential value.
Yeah, I know someone had asked about mentoring programs, but reaching out to one of your local agencies and having a discussion with someone there, they will most likely say, yes, we mentor you, or we can point you in the direction for someone who can assist you in coming back up to speed. So there's a lot of resources out there for you.
Okay, we've got another question. Someone who is a junior who's currently studying industrial hygiene as their major. Are there any specific internships that are recommended to take, and how many should I take?
I guess I can answer. The more internships you have, the better. I know that for a fact, and I highly recommend take several. I would look at your university co-op office, because a lot of times major corporations will only go through co-op, and then also internships. And then you could try to find some on your own. Another great internship opportunity that unfortunately a lot of people don't realize is the United States Public Health Service COSTEP program, which is fantastic and wonderful. It's probably one of the best internship opportunities out there, because they'll pay your travel, you'll get a week's vacation, you're getting benefits while you're there. I've had students have actually had their wisdom teeth pulled for free because they needed it done while they've been on a COSTEP. So that's another great avenue.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up?
There's none coming through. Oh,
yep.
Okay, here's another one. How do you balance displaying internship information on a resume if you have multiple, but also keeping your resume brief?
So I'll jump in there and just take the first crack at it. If you do have multiple internships, and see if you can, one, list the dates of the internships, make sure those are there. But if you can consolidate any of the tasks or the experiences, that would help keep it short. But don't Don't worry too much if your resume starts to gain some length and becomes more of a CV. I mean, of course, you want it to be concise and job related, but do not hesitate to put certain information on there for the sake of keeping it short. But if you do have multiple internships, maybe you can consolidate the language a little bit and keep it job related if there is overlap between your internship experiences.
I will just jump in. I did raise my hand if it counts.
My apologies, Rochelle.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I raised my hand after you. You're totally fine.
Okay.
And I was just going to say this is a great opportunity to use the cover letter. In the example that I gave you, the individual did highlight multiple positions that they were either temporary or internships, and then was able to say how those skill sets or information that they learned would be applicable to this job. So I think that's the opportunity where you can be a little bit more lengthy, add some paragraphs explaining why you're the best candidate. And that would be my recommendation.
All right, last call for any questions. Presenters, anything else that you want to impart before we depart?
This is Tom Butts, the chair of the membership committee, and I really want to thank all of our presenters today, as well as those folks that registered and participated. We really enjoy the interaction with folks entering this career pathway and look forward to hopefully being resources to you moving forward. Thank you to my peers, and thank you to those who came on board today.
All right. And don't forget, we've recorded this session, so we'll be posting that out on the website if you want to be able to go back and watch it again or refresh. All of our contact information will be on the website. So don't hesitate to reach out. This isn't the entire board or all the officers, so you might see some other people's names there in regions that you're located. So feel free to reach out to them as well as any of the NEHA staff. But we appreciate you guys being here today. Thank you, presenters, and you guys have a fantastic day.